Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast. My name is Chris Crawford. I'm joined by my good buddies Tom Viera and Stu Durst, Monotone Football. We're going to be previewing the Northwest Division, and yes, the NBA still has divisions. I'm as surprised as you are, but we're going to be talking about them. This division, of course, has the defending NBA championship and some young up-and-coming teams, some teams that are currently very much in rebuild mode, some teams kind of in the middle, but we're going to go over kind of some over-under stuff, look at some fantasy relevant players from the division. Despite the fact that some of these teams not be very good, there's quite a few of them. And let's start with the Trailblazers. Obviously, the biggest story there is the Trailblazers trading Damian Lillard in one of the biggest NBA blockbuster trades I can remember in a long time, setting the over-under at 28.5 according to DraftKings. And I'll start with you, Tom. Where do you think? What do you think about that over under for a team that has traded literally one of the best NBA players in the league right now?
In a weird way, I'm like confident that they're going to go over. You know, they did pick up a couple solid veterans after the trade. Obviously, they moved Drew Holiday as a result. You know, if they kept Drew, I mean, this number would probably be at 32.
Sure.
There's always a team that wins less than 25 games, and I think that's going to be the Wizards. No offense, Stu. But I think the addition of Deandre Ayton and Brogdon I think it's going to be a duo where it's weird to say Ayton is a veteran presence now.
Right.
But he's going to need to be. He's going to need to step up. I actually like Ayton more than I like Nurkic at this point. So, I really think they have a good chance. And with the youth of Scoot and Shaedon Sharpe, they have some shooters. They have a lot of athletic ability out on the wing. They're gonna be able to compete, I think, on a nightly basis.
Stu, would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I like the over a lot. I think this is going to be a team that's fun, faster than people expect, right? This is, I know people talk about what's your league pass team, right? What's that team you love staying up and watching? I think Portland's going to be one of those teams for me 100% this year. I mean, that young core is a lot of fun. You mentioned Scoot, you mentioned Sharp. Obviously, Simons is someone that we expect to kind of take that next step up in year 3. This is a team that could be really fun on offense. I think we're going to see that tempo go up a lot, especially with Ayton there at center. He's obviously a guy that's used to playing in those fast break situations, someone that can get up and down the floor a lot faster than Nurkic, right? You have to play at a slower pace if you've got a guy like that at center. So I think this is a fun team. You mentioned Brogdon. I'm not sure if he's here by the trade deadline, right? Yeah. I mean, he's that veteran presence. Maybe you want him in your locker room. But if I'm a Portland fan, I want trial by fire. I want to see these young guys instantly. I want to throw them into the mix and see how they handle the NBA. So I kind of hope Brogdon could maybe get moved for another young piece or so, but I'm not sure if that happens until the trade deadline. But I like this young core a lot.
Yeah, it's an interesting group of guys. I think the league pass thing is a great call too, because not only do I think they're going to be fun to watch, because I think they're going to have fun tempo, I think they're going to give up a lot of points. I think this is a team that is going to struggle defensively. Let's talk about Scoot Henderson, just because, the hype for Victor Wembanyama out of control. And I totally get it. Just watching the guy play, it's pretty obvious that this guy's going to be a special player. But I think Scoot Henderson would have been the first overall pick in a lot of NBA drafts. You're going to have some concerns with turnovers, Stu, but where are you targeting Scoot Henderson for in terms of being in redraft leagues for fantasy?
Yeah, no, I like Scoot. Not only fantasy, I even got a little rookie of the year ticket in there. I know Wemby is obviously an intimidating figure at that number 1 spot, but there already has been speculation about his games played this year, about some rest management stuff later in the year. Pop has already talked about that. And there is like a kind of a game number limit you need to hit to win that award. So for me, I do think there's a little inherent value on Scoot, someone that, like you kind of mentioned, this guy's a first overall pick in a lot of drafts. So kind of a little bit of a throwback point guard, more built in that Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose model than a lot of these younger guys we're seeing right now that are chucking everything from 3. You mentioned the turnovers. That's definitely going to be a thing depending on your league center or league settings right here. This is a guy that won't have that amazing Mike Conley assist to turnover ratio off the bat, but he's going to stack up those assists. That's one thing we know, right? This guy is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. You have a very dependable shooter in Simons on the outside. Definitely a top priority for me. And like I said, I already got some rookie of the year sprinkles in there as well.
Tom, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think he just convinced me. I was like, it's so hard to just be like, all the hype on Wemby. You're like, all right, it's Wemby's to lose, right? But you're right. You're getting a pretty good price on Scoot, and the usage is going to be high. And they're going to be a running gun team, like you said. They're going to be up and down the floor, and with that, he's just going to be able to stuff the stat sheet probably on a nightly basis, which is what we're looking for.
Anthony Simons and Deandre Ayton kind of going around the same spot. So I'll start with you, Tom. Of those two, which is the first Trailblazer that you're drafting off the board?
I want to say Anthony, but I think Sharp and Scoot are gonna take some shots away from him in a weird way. So I'm gonna lean towards Ayton. I think Ayton is gonna be, he's the only big that they can really trust there, and he's gonna play a ton of minutes as long as he stays out of foul trouble. I lean towards Ayton.
Stu?
Yeah, no, I feel a similar way. I think Ayton, obviously, he kind of has everything locked down there. Even Drew Eubanks, who was the backup last year, not an intimidating name, is out of town as well. Like, it really is going to be the Ayton show. It's going to be an opportunity for him to kind of rehabilitate his career a little bit after, let's be honest, he's not seen in the most positive light after these last couple seasons in Phoenix. And a guy like Simons, to me, there's a lot of players like him. Nothing against Simons, obviously, but what's the one category he's going to provide value in? It's scoring, right? And that's not necessarily an uncommon trait, especially if you look around the league. A guy like Jordan Poole, who's kind of falling down in some of these fantasy drafts, is going to have pretty much unlimited volume playing the same kind of role. So I think I'd prefer some of these other shooters with a little less competition around them.
So Shaedon Sharp was really good at the end of the season. And now my concern, I guess, is I'm not sure who the heck else was supposed to score for the Portland Trailblazers at the end of the year. I got kind of I think he's a better player than this guy, at least fantasy-wise. I got kind of an Isaac Okoro vibe towards the end of the year where maybe we're overhyping just a little bit. But he was really good at the end of the year, Stu. How excited are you for Shaedon Sharp this year?
I'm more excited from a real life perspective than I am a fantasy perspective, right?
Okay.
And even a betting perspective as well, because I think you kind of mentioned it's important to kind of get an understanding of the identity of a player and what specific, ways he's going to contribute not only to the team, but to the box score for your fantasy points, right? And I think Sharp, I don't think he has a clear path to accumulating stats in any category at an insane rate. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think he's going to be a guy that's very involved in this offense, but I don't ever think the scoring is going to be to that awesome fantasy level you wanted. I don't see him in the 20 points per game range or even getting super close. Same kind of with rebounds and assists. I don't see a clear path to immediate fantasy value. I just more see, a young player that's extremely explosive that I just want to see touch the ball more. So kind of a stay away for me for fantasy purposes, but still, like I said, very excited to see him in real life.
Tom, similar thoughts?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. It's a fun team. It's going to be a team that I can see a wide variety of outcomes. I can't see it being a postseason team, of course, just because of the West, but I do think it will be a team that's going to give teams trouble. It's going to be one of them that you're going to have to gear up for this team because I think they're going to run and they're going to be at least a fun watch. Speaking of fun watches, the Utah Jazz were a heck of a lot more fun to watch last year than I thought they were going to be. I thought this was going to be one of the worst teams in the NBA. Currently set the over-under at 35.5. Tom, that seems like a fairly fair number for Utah. Would you agree with that?
I think it's fair, but I think they're going to regress where they surprised us last year, and this year they're not going to be able to do the same. I mean, where did they actually improve? John Collins. I mean, John Collins is uber athletic. He's somebody I think you get value on in your drafts. He's going to have. Will he return to those 2019, 2020? I don't even know the bubble numbers where he was, he was like 22 points a game. He was averaging a double-double. I like them to go under their win total, to be honest. That's where I'm at with them.
How about you, Stu?
Yeah, I think that's a fair number. I think they end up right around that mark. If I had to bet, I think I would probably lean under as well. But I agree with you. I mean, this is an extremely fun team. I think they'll be fun again this year. But even when you look at their additions, they all felt very similar to guys they already have on the roster, right? We bring in John Collins, then we draft Hendrick. So that's two more guys that are, fours supposedly with Lauri Markkanen in there already. It's kind of interesting to me. And then Keontae George, someone who I'm very interested to see, was awesome back in the summer league, is kind of has that same skill set we see with the other guards, right? Of that shoot first, maybe defense second kind of mentality, which will be interesting to see. But when you already have guys in that mold, it becomes a little bit harder to find immediate minutes, right? So normally when you draft young guys, for me, I would kind of hope they have complementary skill sets. But in reality, it seems to me like they drafted a lot of guys similar that they already have on the roster. And I was just reading before the show as well for fantasy guys. I know John Collins, a very interesting name. I'd like to buy low. I mean, I think this would be a good opportunity. I'm just not sure this is the right situation. They're already talking about how they think it's probably going to take a while for him to get ingrained into this offense. They're asking him to do a lot of things that he wasn't asked to do in Atlanta, and that it's kind of going to be a process of getting him, wrapped up into everything. That's not what I'd want to hear as a fantasy drafter, to be completely honest, in addition to the competition he already has at the 4 spot, right? With Lauri, the most improved player in front of him, and then a rookie sitting there right behind him, gunning for those minutes as well. So it gets a little tricky from a fantasy perspective, but they'll be a competitive team, fighting to try to stay in that playoff conversation till the very end of the year.
Yeah, I think that's a great point on the similarity. It almost feels like a team that's trying to, because clearly not in competitive mode. They're not gunning for an NBA championship the next couple of years, finding out which of these type of guys that they really want for that long term. And I think that's one of the reasons why they acquired Lauri Markkanen last year. And look, to say that he was improved over what he was with the Cavs, now that was a terrible fit. It was very obvious that Markkanen was not supposed to be there. But Stu, this guy was a legitimate top 20 NBA player and NBA fantasy player last year. Are you betting on that type of projection again this year?
It's tough. I really want to. Obviously, I enjoyed everything I saw last year. You don't see leaps like that very often, especially not only like in scoring progression. He did things we never saw before. He suddenly wasn't forced into this outside shooter role. He was doing everything himself. So I think he puts up pretty similar stats to last season. But to be completely honest, if you're expecting even more improvement, if you're trying to see this as some upward chart that's not done, I'd be a little bit worried. I think I'm a betting guy, right? I think we can all kind of agree, if you had to bet, that's his peak. Like last season was his peak. And I don't want to go against the guy. I think he's very talented, but it'd be very hard for me to see him surpassing those numbers he put up last season.
Tom, I want to ask you about Walker Kesller, because I think this is one of the more underrated fantasy guys last year, a guy who, as soon as he got put into the starting lineup, one of the best block rates in the league, could be dominant there. Do you think you're going to see more projection or progression from Walker Kesller in 2023-24?
He should definitely improve on what he did last season. And, he was pretty impressive. He kind of came out of nowhere for me. And it's funny, you were just talking about the competition for John Collins. It's like we didn't even mention Kelly Olynyk, Walker Kesller, Markkanen. They got a lot of bigs. It's almost like what the Knicks used to do, where they just like go out in free agency and they just power forward. You're a 4. Oh, you're coming in. You're our sign. Like when they brought in Taj Gibson, brought back Jared Jeffries, that type of stuff. You're just like, what are we doing with all these power forwards, right? But no, I like Kesller a lot. I think with the center position, I think you could wait and you could easily get a guy like Kesller, and he's gonna return value for sure.
Stu, what about Colin Sexton, a guy who I think has shown flashes of brilliance in the NBA? Obviously, some injury issues, that, to say the least, over his time. But I think that's an interesting situation there, maybe being a little bit underdrafted in fantasy drafts right now.
Yeah, I mean, he has that immediate path to scoring. It's kind of what we talked about, knowing what a guy does well. That's what he's going to contribute to you, right? We saw the assist rate increase a little bit last year, but not really depending on passing, not really depending on rebounding or defense. He's out there to score. And if you think the minutes will allow it, then I agree. I think he's someone that you're going to want, especially when you look at that group we just talked about. Obviously, Lauri improved as a scorer last year, but beyond that, Kesller, a lot of these other guys aren't proven scorers. So the points are going to have to come somewhere. So I agree. And I love Walker Kesller as well. I mean, I'm glad we talked about him. This guy was spectacular from a betting perspective last season. I only see improvement right here. I think he's a defensive player of the year candidate. And I think, I mean, the 25-1 odds kind of show it. I was hoping I'd be a little sneaky, get a 40 to 50-1 kind of thing. But we got to remember, the advanced stats love these kind of guys. He profiles the same as Rudy Gobert, who won the award so many times before, right? I'm not saying they're the same kind of player, and I'm not even saying we give the Defensive Player of the Year to Rudy Gobert if he put up one of those seasons at this point, but the high block rate, the great rebounding, great presence in the paint, he's the guy I'm definitely going to be adding in fantasy this year.
I'm glad we're talking about blocks because I wanted to ask you guys something that I was thinking about the other day. And you guys can just tell me if this is a simple yes or no, I guess. But so blocks being such an important stat, we know that you don't get a field goal attempt if you get fouled and you're going to the line. Should you get credit for a block if you block a shot after if someone is fouled, if it's on a layup and you get that block? Stu, you go first. Do you think you should get credit for a block, or at least that's something that should be put into the advanced stats, I think?
Probably not. I mean, I see what you mean. I think it just gets to like, because I bet on blocks. I know that's not a common thing. So I know what you're talking about.
Sure.
And that like it feels earned in a lot of situations. I think the problem is it's just too much personal judgment in those situations.
There you go.
When are we too far past the foul, right? When is it one of those, the player kind of just chucks it up for no reason, the center comes slamming down out of nowhere, like it's one of those situations where I'd like it to count. I'd like a way for a player to get credit for that. I'm just not sure if there's a way we can accurately assign value to that, to be honest.
Tom, am I crazy?
No, I don't think you're crazy at all. I mean, the offensive player gets continuation. Why shouldn't the defensive player?
Yeah.
So I think I don't think you're that far off. Maybe there is a way that they can a new category, but I don't think it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen. It's just something I was thinking about the other day, just because look, you are taking away 2 points sometimes with those blocks. Of course, you also see guys after a foul is called get the block of just they don't want to see the 3-pointer to go in. So just one of those random things I was thinking about at 2:00 in the morning. Before we get into the actual playoff contending teams and one really playoff contending team, make sure you guys are checking out the Contrarian Edge Optimizer. It is an awesome tool. Great for NFL stuff, MLB postseason. We've got the NBA stuff coming up soon. You can get that at fantasysportslogic.com, or what I would do is check out sportstopia.io and check out the amazing articles that we have, rankings, bets, over-unders, all sorts of great stuff. Tom and Stu contribute a bunch of great stuff. I also contribute, and because I am a person who likes to insult himself, I'll say that my stuff is just okay. But yeah, definitely check that out. All right, before we get into the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm going to take a quick drink of this cup right here. I should recuse myself as a Seattle Supersonic fan, but I will not deny that what Oklahoma City has going on right now is pretty darn impressive. Over under of 44.5. I actually thought when I was doing this that the total might be a little bit higher. I want to start with this, and I'll ask you first, Tom. There was an interesting little debate that happened during the Southeast preview of SGA or Luka Doncic. Where do you side on that one for fantasy anyway?
Ooh, for fantasy, I gotta say Luka, just because he's gonna. Oh man, that is now I'm
it's so close. It's so close.
I think SGA has a legitimate chance. He's going to finish top 3 in scoring. I actually think there's betting value on him to lead the league. I'm pretty sure last I looked, I'm pretty sure he's second in odds to lead the league in scoring. And that's like, but I had to lead towards Luka just because, he's more versatile.
Sure. How about you, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, it's not too hard for me. I think it's Luka right there. I mean, I like SGA. Obviously, I'm a fan of the additions he's been making to his game year after year. Definitely a young guy that's improving. But I think these are two players on different levels. You know what I mean? I think Luka is one of the elite basketball players in the NBA, not just from a real life perspective, but from a fantasy perspective. This is a guy that's obviously a threat to give you that triple double on any given night over there. You also kind of have Kyrie Irving now. That'll be an interesting addition. Hopefully it takes a little bit of pressure off. But yeah, it would have to be Luka for me. Not too hard.
Yeah, I go there as well. And the only reason I think it's close is just like, are you going to get 65 games out of Luka Doncic? That's the question mark. And so, the SGA's had some stuff in his past too. He's not completely bulletproof. No NBA player is. And, even with the new load management rules, you have to worry about some stuff like that. Speaking of load management, Chet Holmgren, Holmgren has really impressed me so far in the postseason. As a Gonzaga fan, I was rooting for him to go absolutely anywhere but Oklahoma City. I'm just going to be flat out honest with you. But I think it's an interesting fit. And Stu, it's been really impressive to see in the preseason. I think he has a chance to be a fantasy stalwart.
I agree. And especially when you look at what this Oklahoma team needed last year, they needed Chet, right? I mean, they were starting a 6'9" and a 6'8" center for most of the season. A team that desperately kind of lacked that rim protection, that rebounding that hopefully Chet is going to provide very fast. And it's funny, like you see these pictures with him again next to Wemby, all that, the huge size difference. We almost forget that this guy was the next big thing before Wemby was the next big thing, right?
Sure.
It's almost that like kind of post hype player we talk about where it's hard to get that excited like we were last season when there's another guy that's even taller than him this year. But no, I like Chet a lot. I agree. I think he's gonna provide value in multiple ways. Obviously, the defense will be applicable right there. Hoping the blocks is something that's seriously in contention. It already has been, like you mentioned, in the preseason so far. I'll be interested to see how he kind of stacks up on defense, right? Physicality and frame is a big deal when you talk about fantasy. You talk about viability, and it'll be interesting to see how much he's out there, if he's able to kind of stomach a full season with his frame and his injury concerns.
Tom, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm thinking my only concern with Chet is going to be foul trouble. I'm interested to see how the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season to see if that's something that he really does have an issue with on the defensive end. But now he's one of the things I always try and do is we always talk about stacking, right? We always try and get a part of a really good team. I think the Thunder are going to be a good team where we can find there's going to be value. You're not going to have to. Anthony Davis, LeBron James, sure, like they're the Lakers. You're going to have to pay a premium for that, though, and you shouldn't. What you should do is go to the Thunder, who are going to be a fun, exciting team. They're going to run. They're going to score. They're going to play defense. They're going to be a well-rounded team, and get a guy like Chet who has immense upside, and you're not going to have to pay the premium like you're going to have to with some other guys.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Josh Giddey made pretty big improvements from shooting, up 7% total from the field, 41.9 to 48.2, up to 32.5 from three, which still isn't very good, but a major jump up from the 26.5. Stu, I think Josh Giddey and Jalen Williams are going to be drafted in a similar area. I'm kind of excited about Giddey from the fantasy perspective, though. I think he could be another guy who could be in for a big season.
Yeah, it's interesting because he's gotten so much talk about his game, and it's not necessarily even in a positive way. It's kind of like, how does this guy score 20 points a night when he doesn't have any moves? Like, he doesn't have a particularly great handle. Like, what is he exactly doing? But I mean, he's showing off kind of a long, lasting debate we've had in the basketball community that a lot of these international guys just bring over that basketball IQ, right? They bring over the fundamentals, and he is a master of the fundamentals so far this season. A guy that it's rare to have a kind of player like him be a triple double threat on any given night, and that's exactly what he is. So for me, it's tough. I really like Jalen Williams. I was a huge fan. I wanted the Wizards to draft him. I thought this guy was a player that really had a pathway to be a viable number 2 on a really good team really fast. And I still think that's true. But just to be completely honest, from a fantasy perspective, it's hard to take him over a guy like Giddey when we know he can contribute in so many different ways in fantasy.
Sure. How about you, Tom? Which one do you prefer from a fantasy perspective this year?
I'm so high on Giddey, but at the same time, I think we're going to pay at the peak for Giddey. I think I'm not convinced he's a true 2 for SGA. I think Chet and Williams have a better chance, and they're a better fit overall. I can't put anything past the Thunder at this point. I wouldn't be shocked if they're in contention and a team approaches them at the deadline and Giddey's on the move. I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but absolutely makes sense because like of what you're building, that's probably the guy who can help you most get like that superstar player, speaking of which, on the move, Oklahoma City, and also ask you first, Tom, do you think they're a lock for a postseason position this year?
I hate saying lock, but yeah. They definitely reached the playoffs.
How about you, Stu?
I agree. I think the depth is too good. I mean, when you look at this team, they've got a good roster of young guys that are ready to step up. I mean, just like we were just saying a minute ago, how many teams would have like the option of having that Williams, that Giddey, that Chet, all there is these kind of young players with so much potential if their number one guy does fall down, not even accounting for, Lou Dort, who's been around these last couple of years.
Sure.
And even what they brought in this European guy, I forget how to pronounce his name as well, but he was kind of balling out on the preseason as well. So it'll be interesting to see. But I agree. I think this is a postseason team for sure.
That was the most professionalism I've ever shown. I just talked for about 5 minutes positively about the Oklahoma City Thunder. All right. The Minnesota Timberwolves, 44.5 even with Oklahoma City. I think they were actually, and Tom, you can tell me whether I'm crazy here, one of the bigger disappointments from last season. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you're not crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely disappointed, but I think they bounce back. Like how I think the Jazz surprised, I think the Timberwolves have a bounce back year. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think the Timberwolves, specifically Anthony Edwards, he's gonna have a career year this season. I'm extremely confident on Anthony Edwards this year.
How about you, Stu? Are you as confident in Minnesota being a bounce back team?
I'm confident in Anthony Edwards. I like that part of what you were saying right there. The rest of the team, I mean, this feels to me like honestly a regular season win total over and then immediate disappointment in the postseason. I don't know about you guys, but this is a tough team, man. I don't like their big man rotation whatsoever. I mean, it's obviously been talked to death at this point, but I just don't see that fit, lasting in the playoffs.
It's really difficult for me to just believe just based on what I saw last year. And it just didn't seem like a team that gelled very well. Stu, Anthony Edwards, obviously one of the most talented, I think, young players in the NBA. Got to improve that free throw percentage, but can this be a guy who returns first round potential this year?
I think so. I definitely think so. I think this is a guy that I think I'm going to consider putting a little MVP money down as well. I took a look before the show, and the prices were better than I expected. You're getting 40-1, 33-1 in a couple spots as well. I think that's actually pretty good value. A lot of people are kind of talking about it, but it's that like off season. He had the good showing on the international stage. It's kind of the perfect time to bring all that momentum together, put all the pieces together and kind of ascend as that number one player on the team, because I don't really see too much scoring competition. And obviously we know there is scoring competition, but I'm saying like, I don't think there's any path or anyone in his way for scoring 30 points a night, which obviously puts him in that MVP conversation.
Tom, do you think Anthony Edwards may be somebody to lay some bucks down on maybe a scoring title this year?
Yes, but I actually like the price we're getting better with MVP than we do with the scoring title.
Okay.
I think one of my favorite things about Edwards is his availability. He's played 72, and I think 79 games the last 3 seasons. The best ability is availability, and he provides that. I think he's going to be out there on a nightly basis. He's going to shoot. They gave him the max contract. It's coming. I am firm that the Anthony Edwards, it is here. It is. I have nothing else to say.
I'll say this too. Really good in hustle. That was one of the better NBA acting performances that I saw in a long, long time. Very, very good villain. And I think he kind of doesn't have a problem playing that role. I'll just say that about Anthony Edwards. Now, Karl-Anthony Towns, somebody I think that is being a little bit forgotten about, mostly because of injury, I think. Was it really interested to see that he averaged 4.8 assists last year? Now, the rebounding obviously goes down. The blocks go down because they have that Gobert guy in the middle. Stu, do you think that Karl-Anthony Towns is in for a big year this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. That's what I was kind of referencing a minute ago. Like, yeah, they do have scoring on the team, obviously. But I mean, still, Anthony Edwards, I still see being the alpha. I don't trust Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't like this weird positional swap where he's not a good center, so obviously he'll be not a good power forward now instead, right? Like the defensive swap is almost even worse. Now we've kind of having to worry about him chasing around guys on the outside, 3-point shooters. I think that might affect the rebounding adversely, like we saw last season as well. If you're out there, defending these perimeter fours, you're not going to be getting those rebound opportunities. And obviously, we've got one of the best rebounders in the league kind of sitting there next to him. So I don't know. The assist uptick is interesting. He's always been a big that has that ability to play make, to create from the center position. But it's just, will they ask him to do that on a consistent enough basis? I'm not sure. I just think there are too many factors here, especially with the injuries in the past, for me to be super in on Karl-Anthony Towns this year.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I don't think a bounce back is coming. I'm super excited about Anthony Edwards. I'm not on. Pretty melancholy on Cat. He had the lowest field goal attempts in a season since his rookie year last year, and I said availability before, and Stu just touched on it. I think he played less than 50 games last season. Injuries, he's 27. He should be in his prime, but Gobert and Edwards are just going to squeeze that production. So it's going to be tough for Cat to really get his, particularly on a nightly basis.
Could you guys see, and I'll ask you first, Tom, could you guys see a big move being made by Minnesota if they get off to a slow start, like seeing one of these? Obviously, Anthony Edwards isn't being traded, but something where they kind of make the core of this team a lot differently?
I think they need to. They gave up so much for Rudy.
Yeah.
It's insane. I'll never understand why they did that. So, yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. Like I said, Cat is 27. He's in his prime. If they're going to move a guy, it has to be Cat. And there's going to be teams that are interested. There's always – he could shoot, and he's a big. He could rebound. There's teams that are going to want it. Maybe – I don't know. I'm not going to go there. I was going to say if, Orlando's in it. If Orlando's in it, it's a good fit. But I like what they have there in the front court in Orlando, so I'm not going to say it. I take that back.
Stu, do you think they'll be patient, or do you think this could be a team that makes a move really quickly?
I think they have to. I mean, this isn't just even like a quiet team that no one's cared about. This is a publicly scrutinized team, right? That's been constantly facing backlash for the lack of progression with this big three. I want to make sure everyone saw the quotes right there, because they are tall. They are physically a very big three if you compare to the rest of the league right there. But yeah, I would have to imagine that's on the table. And I even possibly, like you kind of mentioned before the trade deadline, even if we get off to a slow start, it might be time to just make something happen instantly. And yeah, just to be clear too, it's not Anthony Edwards, right? It's an untradeable player in the league right now. So it's going to be one of those big guys. It seems impossible to trade Gobert given what they just traded him for. I don't see any way they could accept that value. So I kind of agree. It's got to be Cat. And there are some teams. I would actually be way more interested to see Cat on plenty more teams than this one, to be completely honest.
Minnesota and Oklahoma both at 44.5. Tom, who finishes second in this division?
OKC.
Stu?
I think it's OKC too. But like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if it's really close. And then one of these teams, OKC, has a much better postseason showing, right? I could see them losing the regular season battle. It's just really when it comes to playoff time, that's where I see the struggles really being highlighted.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I could see Minnesota being a team that wins 47 or 48 games and then just immediately being bounced from the postseason. I don't like saying that because I really do like watching Anthony Edwards play. I also think Kyle Anderson is one of the more underrated NBA players right now. I just like him as a slow guy, as a person who's hey, you don't have to be fleet of foot in order to be a successful NBA player. He's been slow since he was at UCLA, and God bless him for it. Denver. Is this, Stu, the least talked about defending NBA champion in a very long time, or is this just recency bias?
No, I think it is. And not only that, when they do talk about him, it's not like they're talking about how great they were last year. They're just talking about how Jokić hates playing basketball and he's gambling on horse racing in Serbia, right? They're not even about the accomplishments. They're all just why doesn't this guy love basketball more? Which is an interesting perspective. I love it. I think the Jokić content is absolutely hilarious. And two, even we saw Aaron Gordon visit him in Serbia, and they interviewed him about it, and he was like, this guy's insane. He has the most insane routine out of any player I've ever seen. I know you guys don't see this outside of it, but obviously Aaron Gordon kind of got to see it up close and personal. So I have plenty of confidence this team is coming back and looking just as strong as ever. I mean, to be honest, I don't know about you guys. It's not like I was on some stage, cheering for the Nuggets before, right? I can't claim that As I saw the vision, I saw Jokić being able to step up in the postseason. But we've seen it now. The whole world has seen it, and it's hard to argue against, right? The way that team is moving when everybody is healthy, it is a well-oiled machine. And an absolutely insane team to stop. That's why we're seeing all these super teams out here, right? It's going to be tough to beat these guys. So I don't know about the win total, right? When you look at that, it's the highest out of any team in the league. And obviously, we did lose a couple pieces. Bruce Brown is someone that they're going to miss as well. Sure. It will be interesting to see what young guys step up, though. I mean, Peyton Watson is a guy that's been talked about in league circles these last couple of years. Even Paul George shouting him out on his podcast as one of the best young up-and-comers in the league. Then we got a guy like Pickett, who they drafted to be an immediate contributor out of Penn State, a back-to-the-basket 6'4" point guard. Not something you see a lot, but obviously he kind of does have that weird Bruce Brown mold, right? And Julian Strawther from Gonzaga as well, a very polished outside shooter. This team knows what they want. They're in win contention mode right now. They're bringing around guys that can help them do that. All I'm seeing is people talk about Bruce Brown being gone and Jeff Green being gone. So I figured I'd give you a little counter with, in my opinion, some pretty good additions they made to bolster that team as well.
Yeah, Tom, you just wrote a pretty strong article looking at the win totals of teams and stuff. Do you think Denver should be the favorite to win it all this year?
I don't. It's so difficult to repeat in any any professional sport. NBA might be the easiest to do it but I'm in the I would say I'm in the minority group here where I think everybody's going to be gunning for Denver, right? We know that.
Yeah.
Jokić and Murray obviously showed they could be a dynamic duo in the postseason all the way to a championship title. But with everybody coming for them, I think they truly need a third star. And is it going to be Aaron Gordon? Is it going to be Michael Porter Jr.? I'm not convinced it's Aaron Gordon. I think Aaron Gordon is a better basketball player than he is, which he's never going to reach the star level as Murray and Jokić.
Yeah.
Michael Porter Jr., if he could average 21 and combine that with, he's going to have to shoot a high percentage. I just think that the West is so strong. The Suns, and I even in the article, I'm like, I'm trying to convince myself it's the Suns, but it's not, because the Suns don't have any depth whatsoever. They better than they were last season,
sure,
obviously. But I think the Nuggets need one of those two guys to step up and be a star throughout the season, and particularly in the postseason.
Right.
To really to have a chance to repeat.
Yeah. And look, that's not an insult, I think, to Denver. It's just really hard to win back-to-back titles in any sport, in any league whatsoever. I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about Jokić. Just like to say, it's fun to see an NBA rec league player become one of the best players in basketball, the guy that you would be scared to play against if you were playing pickup basketball in the gym. Stu, is he pretty clearly the number one pick in fantasy drafts right now?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you mentioned availability a little while ago too. This is the guy that's there, right? The injury stuff. I mean, even like just looking at the way he plays from a macro perspective, right? He's not putting himself in a position to get injured as much, just based on play style alone right here. The durability has been insane so far. And yeah, the production at so many different, points in the game controlling. But he's the point guard and a center, right? That's such a rare thing historically. I think he's clearly the number one pick.
So, Tom, Jamal Murray put up pretty similar numbers to what he's done over his career after missing that last season, which I think is more a pretty big compliment, because we see a lot of guys come back and not look so great in that first season back. I think he's being severely underdrafted in fantasy leagues. What do you think about his chances for a big 2023-2024?
I'm not expecting him to, all of a sudden have an incredible season and, outplay his projections, but I think his projections are going to be, pretty spot on. But I agree. I think he's being overlooked, underrated from a fantasy perspective, because he is going to be out there on a nightly basis. He is going to score. He is going to get assists. I agree. I think he's going to have a good season.
Do you agree?
I do, and I actually think that's a really good perspective right there, because I've personally been kind of like, he didn't impress me too much last year. He didn't jump off the page, but I think you actually phrased that in a very good way. That's actually kind of a compliment of really not having that same explosiveness, rushing back immediately from an injury and still putting up those numbers.
Sure.
Maybe a credit to the system rather than talent. Now we have a whole offseason to rehab, to get better, to get more comfortable. I would assume we see a little bit more bursts come back. I actually think that's a very good argument, something that I need to think more about, because before I was a little less, confident in Murray. The injuries are a little bit concerning, but we kind of have seen that time after time of these guys that have that full off season to rehab. They start to look a little bit more like their old self.
So I'll just end with this. What is a successful season for the Denver Nuggets last year, Stu? Like, is anything but a championship a successful season for Denver? Or do you think that this is like, you can call this a good year reaching the conference finals or something along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, with how strong the West is, I don't think you can ever really say a title or bust kind of season. So, yeah, for me, I think a Western Conference Finals appearance is a successful season. I mean, obviously, you might run into the Suns, right? You might run into a Lakers team that's suddenly good at the right time, right? Like, we know the Warriors, I didn't even mention, obviously, as well. Like, there's a lot of competition here. Yeah, I'll say Western Conference Finals as well. I think just making it back, having all the guys healthy, and contributing another good season would be a win right here.
How about you, Tom?
Yeah, I agree. Western Conference Finals for me, for the Nuggets, it's a winning season for them. I think, I started off, I said it's going to be tough to repeat. I think it's true. And, Western Conference Finals appearance, the West is so freaking good. So
yeah.
Yeah,
it is an absolutely loaded field, and it'll be very curious to see. And I think the fact that teams are going to be gunning for them every single night, playing their very best against the defending champion, something you can't ignore. Like, there will be some times where Denver gets the best out of some teams that, like, hey, Portland, that'll be an interesting matchup, just because, Jokić against those running gun teams, that'll be an interesting thing to see, and how much load management takes place. But yeah, pretty clearly Denver the favorite in this division. A fun division, but there might be some teams that are looking forward to the lottery. I'll just say that for sure. Thanks so much for listening to the Fantasy Fire and Ice podcast. We really appreciate you guys checking us out. Make sure you're following us on all of the social media stuff, following us on Twitter or whatever the heck they're calling that website now. We really do appreciate it. We'll be back next week, and thanks again for tuning in.